Girl dads, this video is for you.
There really is a dad hole in every daughter's heart. And if a daughter doesn't have that hole filled with her dad, she will look anywhere to get it filled.
What are the effects of an absent father on a daughter? Want to be a great dad to a daughter? Dr. Meg Meeker answers those questions and many more in this full-length, unedited, unplugged interview with her coming up. Hey dads, it's John Finch with the Father Effect movie, which is free right here on YouTube. And I got the opportunity to sit down with best-selling author Dr. Meg Meeker when we were making the Father Effect movie. Dr. Meeker has been writing, teaching, and speaking for 30 years and is the country's leading authority on parenting, teens, and children's health, and the best-selling author of the book Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, which was a game-changing book for me as a father of 3 girls. Dave Ramsey refers to her as America's mother, and she has appeared on numerous nationally syndicated radio and TV programs, including The Today Show, Focus on the Family, and many others. Without further delay, here's my interview with Dr. Meg Meeker. What do you see as the number one problem for fathers today?
I see as the number one problem in dads, I think there are 2 things that are tied for number one. So I'm going to say, my first response was fear. Dads feel intimidated to do what they know they should do. They're afraid to act on their instincts, and it holds them back because they're afraid of what it's going to do to their child. They're afraid they're going to alienate their child. They're afraid that their child's going to turn to sex, drugs, and alcohol and violent behavior if they do the wrong thing. And I say, never parent out of fear. Never, ever parent out of fear. I think the other thing that that dads are afraid of is that they don't understand their power. Dads have no clue about the power that they have in their kids' lives. And I felt if I could accomplish anything in writing Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, it was to take dads behind the eyes of their daughters, so that if I could help dads for a few minutes see who they are in their daughter's eyes, their lives would never be the same. And that's what dads need to understand, is that you may feel like a loser. You may feel like you're not earning enough money. You may not feel strong enough, smart enough, athletic enough. Your kids aren't thinking about that, particularly your daughters. They could care less. To them, you're enormous in their eyes. So go with it. Go. And dads don't understand that. And that's what, because I really do believe that if dads could see who they are in their kids' eyes, everything that they're thinking about themselves would fall away. And they would begin to realize that they have enormous power, but the things that are important to them as dads in parenting aren't important to their kids. Because when I ask kids to tell me about their dads, they never tell me what their dads do for a job. They never tell me, what kind of a house they live in. They tell me if their dad yells at them or not. They tell me if their dad laughs. They tell me if their dad's fun to be with. They tell me stories about things they did with their dads. They tell me about living life next to their dads. That's the big stuff to our kids. And once dads get tuned into that, then they're going to really be unafraid of in their parenting. And that's my hope and prayer for every dad out there and for our country, really.
Why is it, in your opinion, is it so important for fathers to tell their kids, I love you and I'm proud of you?
It sounds pretty basic, and a lot of dads say, why do I have to do that? My kids know that. But your kids don't really know that. We know that as parents. We know how we feel towards our kids. And it's very important that dads verbalize to their kids, I love you, you're great, you're patient, you're capable, because kids really don't know. And that's one of the places that we parents sort of miss the mark. We assume our kids know. Dads typically love their kids by earning money, buying them things, providing for them. And that's great, because that is love, and that's a great way to love. But you can't just stop there. You need to tell your kids, I love you, because kids don't think about the fact that dad has provided them with this home or dad has given them a good education. They don't think about that. All they know is how they feel, and they need to know every day in order to be successful at school, concentrate in school, they need to know they're standing on solid ground. And the ground is only solid if they know when they walk out of the door in the morning and go to school that dad loves them and believes in them. Then life is good. That relationship that a daughter has with her dad is so primal that if a daughter doesn't feel it's strong, that dad loves her and he believes in her, her world is literally, it feels insecure. She feels like life is falling apart. She attends to her day by sort of pulling different pieces of things together and trying to make sense out of her day. If a daughter knows that she has her dad's love, life makes sense. If she doesn't know she has dad's love, life doesn't make sense. And there really is a dad hole in every daughter's heart. And if a daughter doesn't have that hole filled with her dad, she will look anywhere to get it filled. And one of the most common things that I see is adolescent girls turning to boys for attention, for love, for affection, even just to be touched. Girls will do anything just to be touched and to feel loved by a boy. And they'll have sex with any boy. Even though they may not like it, they will do it because for that moment, they feel that a man loves them. And they'll play mind games with themselves. But then they leave that experience and it's very unfulfilling and they feel lost, they feel empty still. And they go, well, since I have that feeling, something must be wrong with me, I'll try it again. So they go out and they try again with another boy, again with another boy. So a dad's love is so fundamental to a girl's emotional, psychological, intellectual, mental health that if she doesn't have it, her intellectual, mental, psychological, emotional health is very fractured. It just is coming apart. And she really can't get her bearings. And she can't study, she can't function well. It's very interesting. We're finding now that even girls who are the product, if you will, of sperm donors, who were raised by a single mom, literally didn't have a dad, are going now and trying to find who that man was who donated sperm. You see, there's that tie, that bind that is so strong that they will seek out a stranger to identify him as dad. And that's why I call it a primal need. It's a primal drive that all girls have. That's how much it throws them off if they don't have dad. Kids need to know, daughters need to know, and sons need to know that their dad wants to be with them. Dad doesn't want to just provide. He doesn't want to just give them things. He doesn't want to just watch them do things. When a child knows that dad wants to be with that kid, that daughter or that son, and dad says, hey, let's come and do this, what happens in that child's self-esteem is huge because that kid believes my dad, this figure who's larger than life in my eyes, wants my company. And if he wants my company, there must be something good about me. There must be something he enjoys about me. He sees me. He likes what he sees. He's a really smart guy and he wants to have a conversation with me. I must be smart. I must be fun. And that's why time is so important because those are the messages that kids get when they spend time with dad. And you know, all our kids really want to do is live life next to us. They don't want you to razzle dazzle them. You know, they don't want you to provide a lot of wonderful things. They just want to know that you want to be with them. And that's the best thing you can do for kids' self-esteem.
You wrote in your book, and this is a quote I love. It says, you will influence her entire life because she gives you an authority she gives no other man. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Husbands may not want to hear this, okay? Even good husbands. I have a great husband. In every daughter's eyes, her dad has an authority with a capital A. That's because their relationship starts out when she's very young and she's very influential and she doesn't know anything about male love and trusting men. So right from the beginning, dad has an edge over the husband because he teaches her everything, and he teaches her how to love, and he teaches her how to trust, and he teaches her how to feel safe in life. And because she's a child, it's huge when she's learning those lessons. Well, she carries that feeling into her adulthood. And then she meets her husband. And by the time she meets her husband, she comes into that relationship on more equal footing. She's an adult and he's an adult, and they can banter back and forth. And he has an A with authority with a little a. You see, he still has an authority because she loves him, she looks up to him, she admires him, but it's very different from her dad. And what men need to know that are dating girls is that if you've got a good dad, and I don't mean a great dad, a perfect dad, a good enough dad, and any dad can be a good enough dad, any dad, in a daughter's eyes, that when she starts dating a man, in her mind, she is sizing that guy up against her dad. So little a goes up against big A. And I know that's intimidating for boyfriends to hear, but hey, a little intimidation isn't so bad, is it? But that's what girls do. My dad would never do that. My dad would never talk to me that way. My dad would never use that tone of voice. My dad opens the doors for me. What are you doing? You're not opening the door for me. So that comparison is always going on. And it always stays that way. I've talked to 50, 60, 70-year-old women whose dads are alive, and I see in their face that dad still has a capital A authority in their lives. He's bigger than life.
Back to kind of the sexually active, there was a stat that you had in your book that said 76% of teen girls said their father influenced their decision on whether they should become sexually active. Is there a direct correlation between teenage pregnancy and uninvolved or unengaged fathers?
Yes, there is a direct link. They have found that girls who have an involved dad, he can even be divorced, he can be a single dad, but if dad is involved and engaged with his daughters all through life, but particularly during the teen years, girls are less likely to be sexually active and hence become pregnant. And dad is one of the biggest safety valves that a girl has as far as staying away from sexual activity. And again, she has her male needs met. She gets affection from her dad. And incidentally, the number one way to boost a girl's self-esteem isn't by putting her in getting her on an elite soccer team, helping her get her grades up, getting her to become a good dancer. It is showing her, giving her physical affection from her dad is the number one way to boost a girl's self-esteem. Girls who have engaged fathers feel better about themselves. They feel they're standing on solid ground. They're getting male affection and attention. And when their dad communicates to them, no, this isn't something that you should be doing. I believe that you can get through your teen years and through your college years, even wait until you're married. I believe that you should stay away from sexual activity until that time. I'm here to help you do that. Even if dad only says that once in his life, he has increased that girl's chances of not becoming sexually active exponentially. Again, it's that power issue, that authority issue. We moms can tell our daughters, but when dad tells his daughter he believes that she should stay away from sex and she needs to stay away from sex, it's almost a done deal in her mind. It's the power of a dad. And I really believe that the reason dads aren't stepping up to the plate isn't because they don't know how. I think they're afraid. I think they're not being taught. They're not being encouraged. And part of that is the media's fault. A big part of it. Part of it's our fault as mothers. We parent in a way, and I found myself doing this. We parent our girls particularly in a way that says to our husbands, our body language, our tone of voice, get out of here. You don't know how to do this. I know how to do this. I'm a woman. I understand this. So just stay away. We interrupt our husbands when they're talking to our girls. Daughters will be walking out of the house dressed very inappropriately for school. Dad will say, hey, wait a minute. You're not going to school dressed like that. And mom will say, no, you don't understand. This day, dad will back away and the girl will go off to school. And I say to those mothers, how dare you? Let him go. Let him be dad. So dads are afraid to be the men they need to be to their kids. Because some wives are telling them, our daughters and our kids really don't need you. They need me, mom. You know, we're limited and we need men. And many women are afraid to say, we need men to help parent our kids. I think they're afraid because they failed. They feel, you know what, I have not been involved in my kid's life for 10 years. I haven't even seen my daughter. And I say, I don't care how old your daughter is. I don't care when you saw her last. It's never too late for any dad with any daughter or any son. I don't care if the son or the daughter is 50 years old. Engage, start. You'll never find, a dad will never meet more forgiving people in his life than his children, particularly his daughters. Daughters will forgive anything if you let them know that you want to start where you are and start a new relationship with. It will literally change kids' lives, adult children's lives, and it would change our country. That's why this is my mission. Good men. I'm getting behind and pushing them. Well, I think that there's a lot that wives can do, and ex-wives, and mothers, grandmothers, can do to support dads in being great dads. I feel very strongly that wives shouldn't criticize their husbands in front of their kids. Neither should a husband criticize his wife in front of the kids. Because in a kid's eyes, it feels devastating. What do you mean my dad isn't great? What do you mean dad isn't this? So we need to start there. I think that a lot of women, and I know this is going to push a lot of buttons, it's okay. I'm over 50. I can do it. I don't care what people think of me. But there's a lot of animosity that women may feel towards their husbands, and a good husband becomes the dumping ground for many wives. If she had a bad relationship with her dad, if she had a run-in with any other man, if she has a solid relationship with her husband, she'll start to take it out on her husband, and that backfires on the kids, and it backfires in parenting. So I think it's very important for women, if they have animosity towards other men, to figure that out, and in your mind, make sure you're not taking it out on your husband, because we all do it. We all do it in ways that we know we shouldn't, but we do. And I think that's huge, because the message that we send to our kids is, if I'm hypercritical of dad, and I'm always telling him to get out of the way, and I'm always parenting over dad and parenting you, the message that you receive as a kid is, dad can't do this, dad's not good enough, dad's not smart enough. And while many of us don't want to communicate those messages to our daughters and our sons, we do it. So we just need to call a spade and say, okay, let's stop doing it. And it goes for fathers as well. I think the other thing that's very important is to make sure that you're drawing your husband in. And the best way to draw a husband into his relationship with his kids is never through badgering and criticism. You know, we wives are terrific at finding out what's wrong with our husbands. I said, you know, the first 10 years of marriage, you try to figure out what's wrong with your husband. Second 10 years of marriage, you try to fix it. And then after 20, you give it all up. And you just love the guy, you know, and we should start there. And so we need to be encouragers, not badgerers. And say, you know what, rather than saying, you need to spend more time with your daughter. You spend way too much time on the golf course. All you do on a Sunday afternoon is watch football. Your daughter needs you. Don't you get that? We need to say, you know what, honey, I know you love football, but your daughter, she just loves it when you take her out and get the car washed. She loves it when you... Dads are going to jump on that, but they're not going to do it if we keep pushing and correcting and pushing and correcting. So we need to watch our tone of voice. The final thing that I think we need to do is we need to use our body language and our tone of voice in very, very encouraging ways to our husbands in front of our kids. If dad is talking to your daughter, don't interrupt him. We love to interrupt. You know, some men love to interrupt. Don't interrupt. If dad says that a daughter needs to do something, don't jump right in and say, no, she doesn't. If clothing, I have found in my practice, is a big issue with parents arguing about that. Dad wants daughters to dress more modestly for good reason. He knows the mind of a teenage boy. We don't get it. We don't get it. We want our daughters to be accepted. We want them to look like everybody else because we want them to fit. And dads, in many ways, are smarter, so they tell our daughters to do other things. So I encourage wife, when your husband's doing that, let him go. Let him be. Don't challenge it. So if you really disagree with some things with your husband, behind closed doors, with the kids not around, you need to agree what you're going to disagree on and what you're going to agree on. And I think it's always important for parents, whether they're divorced or whether they're married or not, say, what are the top 5 most important things that you feel you want to teach our kids? I will honor those. And now here are my top 5. And so you kind of negotiate that way. And that when that parent is parenting for one of those top 5, you need to back away and let that be. And I think that in other words, we need to release dads to do what they do really well, which is a lot of parenting. It's hard for our egos, but we can deal with it.
How important is the modeling for little girls?
Well, modeling is very, very important. And I think particularly for a little girl, watching how her dad treats her mother. It's not just how he treats her. I mean, that's extremely important. And it's interesting because dads will often be kind of rough with their wives. They may yell at their wives, they may swear at their wives, but then turn to their daughter and say, and treat her very differently. Well, that doesn't sit with a kid. With a daughter particularly. So it's not only important how you treat your daughter, but how your daughter sees you treat other women, wives, his own mother, his sister. We have 3 grown daughters. My mother lives right next to us, and my dad just passed away in March, and my husband has been extraordinary with my mother. And I know that my kids watch how he treats my mother. And every once in a while, I'll tell my son, who's 19, now, see how well dad treats my mom. Marry somebody who likes me. So, but they do. Kids, particularly boys, but girls, internalize what they see. They not only see things that you do and try them on, but they internalize those and they actually become those. So a dad, for instance, can be very gracious and kind and nurturing and loving to his daughter, but if he turns around and yells at mom at night, he negates all of that good stuff during the day because that traumatizes her. She doesn't get that. She doesn't understand. And actually it can make her feel kind of creepy. Why do you like me more than you like mom? I don't get that. That's not the way things are supposed to be. So it's extremely important because, again, girls are watching their dads all the time to see what he's doing and how he's talking and swearing. Language is a big deal for girls. I don't know that it's as big of a deal for boys, but girls bond through talking and through listening. And so how dads speak is very important to daughters because we become intimate with people by talking. Wives are always telling their husbands to listen more and to talk more because that's how we bind and that's how we bond. Men bond in very different ways, and that's fine. But to a daughter, a dad needs to understand that to a daughter, he needs to be more verbal because to her, that's very intimate. You see? So that's why language is very important for her, how dad speaks to mom, his sisters, grandma, and to her. I know that it's very important for most men to work hard for their families. And I know that your job is a big part of your identity. My work is part of my identity, but my identity has many different facets. And that's good, that's okay. So if I lost my job, it would be hard for me, but it would be much harder for my husband. A man's job is so much a part of his identity that I think it's very natural for him to feel that that's a big part of who I am. So if I'm going to love my family, I'll work harder at my job. So I think that it very rightly throws them for a loop when we wives come to you and say, all you do is work, you don't care about us. And he's scratching his head going, I love you and all I care about is you, that's why I work so hard. I think it's also important for men to be a good example to their kids, to show them that your work is noble, hard work is a good thing, you need to model hard work to your kids, and that's good. But we need to remember that you're modeling to children who also need your time, and they need your words, and they need your affection. And you're living with a person who binds and bonds to you through being with you and talking to you. You know, and it's wonderful. So dads need to understand, yes, this is a big part of my identity. And yes, a big part of my being a good dad is working hard out there in the workforce for my kids. But I also need to understand that from a kid's perspective, they need me. Now, I stand up in front of huge lecture halls filled with men, hundreds of men, and I stand up and I say, what your daughter needs is you. Now, I understand what I'm saying, and men look at me like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Your daughters need you. They need your person. They need your touch. They need your time. They need your feelings. They need to hear you talk about anything. What are your opinions about things? What do you think about the president? What do you think about God? They need to see who you are as a person. And the only way you can do that is through spending time with them. So I don't know that a dad having knowledge of that is natural. And the great thing is, because of the way your mind works, if we identify the problem and we tell you the solution is just being with us more and exposing more of your character to us, most of you go, okay, I can do that, because you know how to solve problems, right? And so that's, if you need to incorporate that into being great dads, and then you're there. It's really pretty simple.
In your opinion, in the girls that you talk to, the kids that you talk to, why do you think men struggle at being good fathers?
Well, I think men struggle at being good fathers because, first of all, they don't have any support. Find me somebody out there who's supporting dads. You know, my Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters book didn't become a national bestseller for no reason. It's because nobody out there is encouraging dads. You can't imagine the letters I got from dads saying, thank you for saying something nice about me. And it broke my heart. So I think that dads aren't being good. They're not, I'm not going to say they're not being good dads. They're not being the dad they could be because they're not getting support. I think that dads are afraid. They're afraid of making mistakes, and they feel that rather than make mistakes, I'm just going to stand in the background. You know, I got mom who's running around doing all this kind of stuff, feeling like a crazy person, living like a crazy person. Just let her go. And I'll stand in the background and I'll just sort of pitch in when I'm needed. And they're not doing it because they don't necessarily not know what to do. They just feel safe there. So they're intimidated. I think that dads also believe a lie, and that is this. We were talking about this earlier, that in order to be a great dad to a daughter, you need to be able to understand her. Here's the big news. No, you don't. You can be a great dad and have no clue as to what's going on inside her head. You know, there are a lot of great OBGYN doctors out there who've never been through labor. None of them have been through labor, but they're great doctors because they know if I am just who I am to this person, I'm compassionate, I'm loving, I'm kind, I'm making eye contact, I'm listening, and I'm doing a few things right, I can be a great dad. No one tells them that, and I think, so dads, I think, start to believe some lies. And that is one of them, and that's a big one, that I need to understand how my daughter thinks in order to parent her well. No, you don't. Every dad is wired with everything he needs to be a great dad to his daughter and to his son. Any dad. And all he needs is a spark. He needs just a little bit of lighter fluid, and let him go and get out of his way. Yes, he's going to make a lot of mistakes. Who cares? He's going to do a lot of great things right. And good men fall down, make mistakes, say they're sorry, and they get back up and they keep marching forward. I think another reason that dads are afraid to parent out of their instincts. And this is really what I'm talking about. Dads have that instinct. There are male juices that flow through your veins that don't flow through ours. And that's why I really believe that if I wanted to keep a girl out of the backseat of boys' cars, I needed to talk to her dad. I think that dads are under a lot of peer pressure. And that is this, that good dads, they feel, understand their kids, right? lie number one. You don't need to understand your kids. They need to be good listeners. Yes, they need to be good listeners, but they need to not step on their kids' toes. They don't need to be domineering. They don't want to be opinionated. They don't want to come down hard on their kids. And dads misinterpret that and say, okay, well, then I'll just stay out of my kids' lives. What should I do? I don't want to make mistakes. I don't want to be domineering, so I'm going to stand out, and I'm not going to say, no, you can't do that. You need a curfew. You're coming in by 10:30 at night and standing on it. Their instincts tell them they want to, but they're afraid to act on their instincts because none of the other dads are. The cool dads don't do that. The cool dads let the kids drink beer in their house and smoke dope in their house and this kind of a thing. No, they don't. The sad kids have dads who let them drink in the home. No kid likes that, and I've talked to a lot of kids have. So dads are under a lot of peer pressure to be like other dads and to scream at the hockey games and show up at all the soccer games and, you know, and be the hyper exuberant coach and so forth. And they don't really need to do that, but they're doing that because that's what all the other dads are doing. And finally, I think that dads are portrayed, I think the media has a huge role to play in beating up dads. And dads say, yeah, but that's just TV. But look at television, look at movies, listen to the music that our kids listen to, and there is not a smart dad to be found anywhere. You know, next to pastors and priests, dads are, in the media's eyes, portrayed as the most stupid of the bunch. And while we may say, yeah, that's just TV, make no mistake, our kids are listening to this. And I hear kids talk to dads in ways that are deplorable in my office. Smart, very smart men, and their dads say something, the kids say something rude to the dad, because that's how kids talk on TV. And the dads, I have heard this, the dads will apologize for upsetting the kid so that the kid had to say something rude to the dad. And I want to stand up and spank that kid. And I say, sir, you know, Johnny was just rude to you. That is not okay. But I always say that after I ask the kid to go out into our waiting room. And I say, sir, that should not be. That's not okay. You know, well, I didn't think it was okay, but you know what? I just don't want to alienate him. I want him to always talk to me. Well, he doesn't need to always talk to you. He needs to respect you. It's that authority issue again. So dads are portrayed in the media, which our kids are watching 3, 4, 5, 6 hours a day, as dumb. Kids believe their dads are dumb. Dads aren't engaging their kids, standing on the periphery of their families. No wonder they're terrified to engage their kids. They don't know what to do. And it's safer to throw up their hands and go, oh, well, than to engage and make mistakes. When a dad makes a mistake, it's very, very important for a couple reasons to acknowledge it to his child. First of all, if the kids saw the mistake, they know it was a mistake and they know dad failed. And when a dad comes along and fails to acknowledge that, the kid starts to realize, well, maybe that wasn't a mistake. Maybe that's the way it's supposed to go. Maybe dad's supposed to yell, shut up to me all the time. Maybe that really is okay. It didn't feel okay to me, but dad didn't apologize or say anything about it, so that must be okay. Very dangerous for a kid. The second reason it's very important to acknowledge truth to kids, which is really what you're talking about, I flubbed up, I'm very sorry, is that it gets the child back on track as far as being able to trust their instincts. Dad told me to shut up. It doesn't feel right. I don't think that's what dads should do to their kids. Okay, you said you're sorry. Phew, I'm getting it. Now I know how to do that. But when a dad asks for forgiveness and apologizes to a child, it draws that child very, very close to dad. That child now feels that he or she can trust dad more. Dad's smart. Dad is strong. Because dad acknowledges his mistakes, but now dad's going to do something about it. He said shut up, or he swore at me, and now he said that was wrong. I apologize. I'm not going to do that again. oh, that makes me feel so good. My dad is so great. Now I can really trust my dad to do the right thing because it didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel good, and he's going to make it right. You see, now that child feels so close to dad. And isn't that what we all want with our kids? We want to be closer with our kids. And now that child is going to trust dad a whole lot more. And would you as a dad want to miss out on all that? That's what you miss out on when you are too proud to go to your child and say, I am so sorry I said what I said. I'm so sorry that I did what I did. Will you forgive me? I'm going to work very hard, and this is important, I believe, in the apology, to not do that again. I'm going to work very hard. That's how you lead. That's how great leaders lead. And the truth is, you're a leader in the home, whether you acknowledge it or not. Even if you're not in the home with your child, as a dad, and there may be dads who are sitting in prison, listening, you're still leading your kids. Because in your kids' eyes, you're still a leader, and they want to know where you're going next.
This was a question I asked my wife. I said, okay, honey, if you're sitting down with Dr. Meeker tomorrow, what would you ask her?
Yeah.
And it was actually a really good one.
Uh-huh.
She said, what are the common mistakes that even involved and engaged fathers make?
Mm-hmm. As far as, I wrote a whole chapter on teaching why dads need to teach their kids about God. And taking them to church is very, very important. But kids don't care that much about that. We care about that. One of the things that I see from very good dads is that they drop the ball too quickly thinking that a job is done. And that job can be teaching them about God. It can be letting your kids know that you love them. It can be paying attention to what's going on in their kids' world. They assume that their kids believe these things. And you can't assume anything with a kid, because a kid is thinking very differently from you do, from the way a dad does. For instance, if you want to transfer a healthy, vibrant faith to your daughter and to your son, which I personally believe is very important as a Christian for a father to do, the best way that you can transfer that faith is to teach your kids that God is real, that God loves them, and that He is present. And kids will test you to figure out if you believe that's real. So the minute you take your kid to church, your daughter to church, or you teach them about the Bible, or you give them devotions, they're going to go, well, that's nice, Dad, but what do you think? And they're going to very quickly start to read you in a different way. And if dads have any child in their house older than 18 months old, they know one thing: that kid watches them like a hawk. Because kids want to know what you think. Because if you think God is real, and you think God is good, and you behave the way God thinks you should, then okay, they'll believe it. But if they read that you're not so sure about it, they're not going to believe. You can take them to church 5 days a week, but if they don't see it in you, you're crazy. They're very simple about that. So in a way, the minute you open your mouth and say God is real, you're on. Dad is on. And that's very, very scary for a lot of kids. It's very important for girls, even more important for boys. Because when the boys become teenagers, they hit those adolescent years, life for boys is all about dad. Mom's off, dad's on. And there's a dynamic going on that every dad needs to know about, and that is this: that boys become men by watching men. They watch, they imitate, they watch, they imitate. They try on your behaviors. They try on your faith. They try on your tone of voice. So if you swear, guess what your son's going to do? If you yell at him, guess what he's going to do? And the same is true for daughter. So if you really want to teach a great lesson to a daughter or to a son, you have to be that lesson. And I think that's where great parents fall short. They teach, they show, then they go off and do their own thing. I think great parents always carry a roll of duct tape. My husband does this very well. He teaches, then he keeps his mouth shut, and he behaves. He acts. He acts. If I can share a story about my husband really quickly, I talk about, we have an egg roll story. And this is a great case in point. He was a big inspiration for my writing this book. We have 3 grown daughters. He was a terrific dad to them. Actually, our daughters are more like him. My son is more like me. But anyway, they're very, very self-confident girls. And my husband isn't a big talker. He has a very strong faith. He's memorized whole books of scripture. He loves the Lord. He prays for his patients. We were having Chinese takeout food one night, and my husband and I said, "Can you go pick up our Chinese takeout? I am too tired, so can you do that?" He said, "Sure." He took one of our daughters, and before he walked out the room, I said, "Now listen, don't forget my egg rolls. That's my favorite part of the whole meal, and I know you're going to mess this up. You're going to come back without my egg rolls." So he went off, took our daughter, picked up the Chinese food, and on the way home, he saw a homeless man digging through a garbage can in a park very close to our house. So without saying a word to our daughter, he pulled his truck into the parking lot. He took all the bags of the Chinese food, and he took them over to the man rummaging through the garbage pail, and he said, "What would you like to eat?" And he offered everything to the Chinese man. Not to the Chinese, he offered everything to this man digging through the garbage. Well, what do you think the man took? My egg rolls. So he took the egg rolls, and he got back in the car, and my husband came home, and I took the food out, and the egg rolls weren't there, and doggone if I didn't get mad at him. I said, "How could you forget the egg rolls?" Well, being a very godly man, my husband didn't say anything to me. He didn't get mad at me. He said, "Oh, they're not there." And I was really upset. When anything goes wrong in our house, I'm a typical wife. I blame my husband. And my daughter, who was about 6 at that time, came over and she yanked on my sleeve and she said, Mom, Dad gave your egg rolls away to a man in the park who was rummaging through the trash." My husband walked out of the room, came back in, we sat and we ate our Chinese food, and I felt about that big. But here's the good part of the story. Our girls have grown up now, and they serve the poor in different countries. That same daughter grew up and taught school in Indonesia for a year and a half. Our other daughter lived in Chile for 6 months working in a foster care home, not because of what I do, because of who their dad was in front of them. That's the thing that parents forget. Our kids are watching, so we need to speak less and be more to them, because our kids will try us on, particularly with dads who have an authority with a capital A in their eyes.
What do you think are the biggest mistakes fathers make?
Biggest mistakes fathers make, well, disengaging. I think it's very easier, well, I don't know if it's easier for men than for women to disengage, but I think it is. I think it is. I think that dads are taught that as a man, it's perfectly fine to just sort of back out and disengage people. You know, you don't need people, you don't need conversation, you don't need connection, need friends. You know, whoever said that, I don't know. But I think that's the biggest mistake dads make, is they pull back, particularly when their daughters are teenagers. You know, the minute a young girl, sort of 12 years old, plants her right fist on her hip and she points the finger at dad and gives him what for, he says, "Okay, I'm done. You know, where did my nice little girl go? We'll meet up again in 6, 7, 8 years," and they pull back. And I tell dads that's just the time you need to move in, because whenever girls get snarly and bossy and that kind of a thing, it's really a red flag that underneath they're just trying to figure it all out, and it has nothing to do with you. Do not take them personally. And that's another mistake dads do, is they take their kids too personally, their daughters. You know, girls start to yip and do this and that, and they think, well, what have I done wrong? What have I done wrong? Well, you didn't do anything wrong. She's just having a temper tantrum. 17-year-olds can have temper tantrums, you know, not just when they're 2. So I think disengaging, and then as we talked about earlier, I think feeling intimidated, being intimidated.
What is the best thing a father can do for his children?
Oh, boy.
Or the best few things?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, I think the best thing a dad can do is to engage his kids. That when you're with your kids, listen to your kids, look at them when you're talking to them, be courteous to them, express your feelings to them. And I think just be who you are to your kids. Be the good side of who you are to your kids. You can put a lid on the bad side. Because that's all your kids really want is dad. They just want dad. But I think second to that is I think it's important for dads to teach their kids about God. And I'll tell you why I think it needs to come from dad. Because we in Christianity perceive God as male. Jesus was male. Christ is neither male nor female. I mean, God is neither male nor female. He's spirit, but we think of him as male. And I think that when the reason it's important for dad to teach their kids about God is because you are your kids' first reflection to male love. And you sort of put a template over their hearts for how they're going to relate to all male figures, including God. So if you are aloof and you're distant and you're disengaged and you don't teach them about God, they may never really feel safe with God. Plus, I think it's very important for kids to know about God. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to come from dad because you say, you know what? I'm the best dad that I can be, and I'm working very hard at it, but I got a backup. And the backup is God. So when I mess up and I say things to you I don't mean, you need to know God would never do that. God doesn't make the mistakes I do. So you are the conduit to God, the first male conduit to God. Now, I can teach my kids about God, and I can show my kids God through my person and my faith, and model different things to them. But I'm female, and Christ wasn't female. Christ was holy man. So to whatever degree you want your kids to relate and be close to Christ and to God, it really, I think, that's a responsibility that dads have. It's a big one. But I think that those are the two best things that a dad can give their daughter or their son. Engage them the best you can, teach them about God the best you can, and you're there.
Last question, what I'll do is I like to give everybody kind of an open mic time. If there's something that you have on your heart, something in mind of, again, we're kind of, as it stands right now, targeting men in churches, but just men in general.
Men in general.
That you see.
Yeah.
That if you haven't said it,
nope.
And you think, man, this would be a great message. If you're done, you say, John, I'm shutting up.
Okay.
I'm out of words.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I have one more thing I think it's important to talk about, and that is my dad. My dad was a big inspiration for writing of the book, and many people read the book and go, oh, your dad was a perfect man. And my dad was not a perfect man. But the reason that I wrote a story about my dad in the beginning is this. Dads believe that they need, if they're going to be with their kids, they need to set aside special time, special conversations, make things right. I see this prevalent particularly in divorced dads who only get their kids every other weekend. I need to make this time special, so I'm not going to this and I'm not going to that. I'm going to make it wonderful and jam all these things in. But really, the life-changing moments that a daughter receives from her dad come along the way. It's just when you're living life next to your kids. And for instance, my dad was extremely influential in my life. He was an enormous figure in my life. He was not a big talker. Very quiet, introverted man. But I knew somehow, and I can't even articulate to you how I knew it, but I knew that my dad believed in me. And that was extremely important to me because my dad had that authority with a capital A in my eyes. And when I was 16 years old, I decided I was going to go to medical school. That was it. Look out, everybody. I went to an all-women's college, didn't want to be distracted by anything. I was just going to study and go to medical school. So at the end of my college career, I applied to medical schools. My dad was a physician. I applied to medical schools, and one after another rejection came in. Finally, my last rejection from medical school came in, and I would have graduated college. And I was beside myself. I mean, what am I going to do? My life is over. You know how you think when you're 21. My life is over. There's nothing I can do. So I went out for a jog to kind of clear my head and to cry and do these things. And I hadn't really said much to my parents, but they knew that things weren't going very well. And I'll never forget, I walked in the house. I was going up to my room to change because I was all sweaty. I'd had a shower, and I heard my dad in his study talking to someone on the phone. And I heard him say my name. So I stopped and I eavesdropped outside of the room. And I heard my dad say to whoever he was talking to on the phone, "Oh, yes, my daughter Meg is going to be going to medical school very soon." And I stopped and I thought, oh, my dad's either done one of two things. He's either paid somebody off that I don't know about, or he knows something that I don't know. That was the second thing. My dad knows something about me that I don't know, and that is that I can go to medical school. And when I heard my dad say, she will be going, I knew that I had what it took to go. Now, I didn't know that I would be going, but that's all I needed to hear. And I will tell you, at age 50 or 48 or however old I was when I wrote this book, I heard my dad's voice as I was writing this book. And the voice meant to me, you can finish the book. You can finish the book. And here's the interesting thing. When the book came out, my dad died in March of Alzheimer's. And he knew my voice, but he didn't know my name. I think he just knew the familiarity of my voice. The book came out right before he got really bad. And when I handed him the book and I said, look, Dad, the beginning is about you. And he said, well, read it to me, read it to me. And I read him the title and he was so excited. But when I read to him about the story of me overhearing him in his study say I would be going to medical school, guess what? He didn't remember having said that. And at that point, he was in his right mind. And my point is that dads change their kids' lives in a sentence, by a look in your eye, by an encouraging word, by a phone conversation. And you don't even realize you're doing it, but that's the power of a dad. So don't worry about the razzle-dazzle or making sure that your time with your daughter is this way or this way or this way. Live your life and love her and bring her alongside you. That's all you need to do. And she will become who she's going to be, and part of you will be with her and be in her. And it's true, and I know it's true because I've lived it as a daughter. And I was so taken aback when my dad said he didn't even remember making that statement on the phone. He even challenged me. I said, yes, you did. Dad, it was a big moment. And I think in that moment he realized the power that he had because he saw it in the book. And he wasn't a perfect dad, but he was a great dad. He was a good enough dad.
Last one, it says, if you had a friend that was going to be a new father for the first time, what advice would you give him?
Oh, gosh. I would tell him, do not be afraid. Never parent out of fear. Love your kid the best you can. Don't try to be perfect. And always move forward. Don't look back over your shoulder at all the mistakes you made. None of us can live that way, and I don't think that that's the way we're meant to live. Keep moving forward. Make amends, say you're sorry, but try better the next time, because that's all your kids want. It's all your kids want.